The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty street of Redemption Creek, Arizona Territory, 1881. As Elijah Nolan tightened his grip on the reins, his weathered face as hard as the rocky terrain surrounding them. His 4 exhausted children huddled together in the back of the wagon, their eyes hollow with grief, their clothes still black from their mother's funeral 3 days prior. Elijah had not always been harsh. There was a time when laughter came easily to him, when his blue eyes sparkled with mischief rather than hardened with determination. That was before Margaret had succumbed to the fever that swept through their homestead like wildfire, leaving him alone with 4 children, and a ranch that demanded more than one man could give. Thomas, the oldest at 12, sat with his arm protectively around 7-year-old Rebecca. The twins, James and Joseph, only 5 years old, had finally stopped crying, their small bodies slumped against each other in exhaustion. 3 days on the trail had taken its toll, but Elijah couldn't stay in their old place, not with Margaret's ghost haunting every corner. "Pa," Thomas called from the back of the wagon, "Joseph's fever's getting worse." Elijah's jaw clenched. He'd hoped the boy was just tired from the journey. "We're almost to town. He'll see a doctor there." The road into Redemption Creek was rutted and unforgiving, much like Elijah's life had become. The town had grown since his last visit 6 months ago. The railroad had brought prosperity to some, desperation to others, and the usual mix of saloons, mercantiles, and hopeful souls looking for a fresh start in the West. As they approached the town's only hotel, Elijah noticed a woman stepping out of the general store across the street. Even from a distance, something about her caught his eye, perhaps the graceful way she moved or how her chestnut hair caught the last rays of sunlight. He quickly dismissed the thought. A widower with 4 children had no business noticing such things. "Mr. Nolan." The hotel proprietor, Edwin Barnes, hailed him from the porch. "Heard you might be common this way. Mighty sorry about your wife." Elijah nodded curtly, unwilling to discuss Margaret with anyone. "Need a room and a doctor for my boy. Of course, of course." Edwin's eyes softened as he glanced at the children. "Dr. Sullivan's just down the street. I can send for her if you'd like." "Her?" Elijah frowned. "Since when does Redemption Creek have a lady doctor?" "6 months now. Came from back east. Smart as a whip, that one. Saved my Milla's life when she took ill last winter." Elijah hesitated. A woman doctor wasn't what he'd expected, but Joseph's flushed face and labored breathing left him little choice. "Send for her, then." Within 15 minutes, the children were settled in a spacious room on the 2nd floor, and Elijah was pacing the worn floorboards when a soft knock sounded at the door. He opened it to find a woman in her late 20s, medical bag in hand, her expression calm and professional. Her eyes were a deep green, intelligent and assessing, and her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though a few tendrils had escaped to frame her face. "Mr. Nolan." "I'm Dr. Sarah Adler. Mr. Barnes said one of your children is ill." Her voice carried a hint of the East, but was warm and confident. Elijah found himself momentarily speechless before remembering his manners and stepping aside. "It's Joseph. He's 5. Started with a fever yesterday, doctor." Adler moved past him, her gaze immediately finding the small boy on the bed. She set down her bag and approached Joseph with a gentle smile. "Hello there, Joseph. I'm Dr. Sarah. Your pa tells me you're not feeling well." To Elijah's surprise, Joseph didn't shrink away as he usually did with strangers. Instead, he watched the doctor with curious eyes as she laid a cool hand on his forehead. "You're burning up, little man. Let's see what's causing this, shall we? For the next several minutes, doctor." Adler examined Joseph thoroughly, her movements efficient yet tender. The other children watched silently, Thomas with suspicion, Rebecca with fascination, and James with uncertainty. Finally, she straightened and turned to Elijah. "It's not serious, but it could become so without proper care. He has a throat infection that's causing the fever. I'll prepare a medicine that should bring it down by morning." She reached into her bag and produced a small bottle. "For now, give him a spoonful of this every 4 hours. Keep him drinking water, even if he resists." "Is he going to die like Ma did?" James's small voice broke the silence, his lower lip trembling. Dr. Adler knelt before the frightened child, her face softening. "No, sweetheart. Your brother has a different kind of sickness, one that my medicine can fix. I promise he'll be feeling better soon." She looked up at Elijah, her eyes taking in his exhausted state and the lost look of the children. "When was the last time these children had a proper meal, Mr. Nolan?" Elijah ran a hand through his hair. "We've been on the trail. They've had jerky and biscuits." Something in her expression made him feel like he'd failed some unspoken test. "I see. Well, they need substantial food. I'll have Mrs. Barnes send up a hot meal." She hesitated, then added, "For all of you." Elijah bristled slightly. "We don't need charity, doctor." "It's not charity to ensure children are properly fed, Mr. Nolan." Her voice was firm but not unkind. "Consider it part of Joseph's treatment if you must." Before he could argue further, Rebecca approached Dr. Adler, her small hand reaching out to touch the doctor's skirt. "Can you fix Sad too?" she asked quietly. Dr. Adler's expression softened as she knelt to meet Rebecca's eyes. "Sad is trickier than fevers, sweetheart. It takes time and love and sometimes many tears. But it does get better, I promise." She glanced up at Elijah, something unspoken passing between them, an understanding, perhaps, of shared grief. For the first time since Margaret's death, Elijah felt a moment of connection with another adult who seemed to genuinely understand. "I'll return in the morning to check on Joseph, Doctor," Adler said, gathering her things. "Try to rest, Mr. Nolan. You look as though you need it as much as your children do." After she left, the promised meal arrived: hearty stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The children ate ravenously, color returning to their cheeks. Even Joseph managed a few spoonfuls before falling into a more peaceful sleep. As Elijah tucked the other children into bed, Thomas watched him with eyes too old for his years. "Pa, what happens now?" he asked quietly. "Where are we going to live?" Elijah sighed heavily. "I bought a ranch outside town, sight unseen. The agent swears it's good land with a solid house. But who's going to help with the little ones, and the cooking and washing and such?" Thomas persisted. "Ma always did those things." The question pierced Elijah's heart. He had no good answer. "We'll manage, son. Somehow." But as he sat in the darkened room, listening to his children's breathing, Elijah wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. He knew cattle and horses, not how to raise children alone. The ranch would demand all his time and energy. Yet his children needed so much more than he knew how to give. For the first time since Margaret's death, he allowed himself a moment of doubt, a crack in the harsh exterior he'd maintained to keep moving forward. Then, remembering the doctor's calm competence and unexpected kindness, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in weeks: hope that perhaps tomorrow might be marginally better than today. The morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of the hotel room. Elijah had barely slept, dividing his time between checking on Joseph and staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with all the challenges that lay ahead. He was just helping the other children dress when another knock came at the door. "Doctor." Adler stood there, looking fresh and composed despite the early hour, her medical bag in hand and a basket over her arm that emitted enticing aromas. "Good morning, Mr. Nolan. I thought your family might appreciate some breakfast." She held up the basket. Mrs. Jenkins at the cafe was quite insistent when she heard about your circumstances. Before Elijah could respond with his usual pride, 4-year-old James darted forward. Is that cinnamon rolls I smell? Ma used to make those. Dr. Adler smiled down at him. Indeed it is, young man. And there's enough for everyone. Elijah found himself stepping aside to let her in, his objections dying on his lips at the sight of his children's first genuine excitement in days. The doctor set the basket on the small table by the window, then moved directly to Joseph's bedside. Her examination was thorough but gentle, and when she straightened, her smile was reassuring. His fever has broken. The medicine is working. She brushed Joseph's hair back from his forehead. How are you feeling this morning, Joseph? Thirsty, the boy whispered, his voice raspy. Thirst is good. It means your body is ready to heal. She poured a glass of water from the pitcher by the bed and helped him take small sips. Elijah watched the interaction, noting how naturally Dr. Adler handled his son, how the tension in Joseph's small frame eased under her care. It was a stark contrast to his own fumbling attempts to comfort his children since Margaret's death. As the other children descended upon the basket of breakfast goods, Dr. Adler moved to stand beside Elijah. May I speak frankly, Mr. Nolan? She asked quietly. He nodded, bracing himself for criticism of his parenting. You've taken on a tremendous burden trying to manage these children alone while establishing a new ranch. Her voice held no judgment, only practical concern. Have you considered hiring help? Elijah's jaw tightened. Can't afford a housekeeper yet. Need to get the ranch running first. I wasn't suggesting a housekeeper. She hesitated, then continued with determination. Let me help you with them. Elijah stared at her, certain he'd misheard. I beg your pardon. Your children need care that you cannot provide while working a ranch, she said matter-of-factly. I have medical training that could be valuable, especially with Joseph still recovering. And I. She paused, something vulnerable flashing across her face. I find myself with unexpected free time in the afternoons. Why would you offer such a thing to strangers? Suspicion edged his voice. Dr. Adler's expression softened as she glanced at the children. Because I recognize the look in their eyes, Mr. Nolan. I lost my mother when I was 9 years old. My father was a good man, but he hadn't the first idea how to manage a household or a grieving daughter. The personal admission surprised Elijah. Before he could respond, Rebecca approached, tugging at Dr. Adler's skirt. Are you going to visit us again tomorrow? The girl asked hopefully. Dr. Adler knelt to Rebecca's level. Would you like me to? Rebecca nodded vigorously. You smell nice. And you fixed Joseph. A genuine laugh escaped Dr. Adler, a warm, melodic sound that seemed to brighten the room. Well, that's high praise indeed. Standing, she turned back to Elijah. I make this offer with no strings attached, Mr. Nolan. I can come by your ranch for a few hours each afternoon to help with the children while you establish your homestead. When you're settled and can make other arrangements, I'll step aside. Elijah studied her face, searching for hidden motives and finding none. Part of him wanted to refuse, immediately accepting help felt like admitting failure. Yet the practical part of him recognized the wisdom in her offer. What would people say about a single woman spending time at a widower's ranch? He asked gruffly. A hint of amusement crossed her face. People will talk regardless, Mr. Nolan. But if it concerns you, I'll only come when your ranch hand is present, or we can arrange for Mrs. Barnes to accompany me occasionally. She was offering him a practical solution to his most pressing problem, with his children's welfare clearly her primary concern. Still, his pride warred with necessity. Think about it, she suggested, sensing his reluctance. I'll return tomorrow to check on Joseph again. You can give me your answer then." After she left, Elijah spent the day settling his affairs in town, finalizing the ranch purchase, ordering supplies, and arranging for a wagon to transport them to their new home the following day. Throughout these tasks, his mind kept returning to Dr. Adler's offer. By nightfall, as he watched his children sleeping, their faces peaceful for the first time in weeks, he reached his decision. The next morning, when she arrived to check on Joseph, Elijah met her at the door. "The ranch is 10 miles west of town," he said without preamble. "We're heading there today. If your offer still stands, we'd be grateful for your help." Dr. Adler's smile was warm and genuine. "I'll come tomorrow afternoon, Mr. Nolan." The Nolan family's new home was a weathered 2-story farmhouse set amid rolling grasslands, with mountains visible in the distance. The barn needed repairs, the fences had gaps, and the house itself was dusty from disuse. But the land was promising good water, good grass, good possibilities. Elijah spent their first day directing the children in unpacking and basic cleaning, though it was clear none of them knew quite what they were doing. Thomas took to chopping firewood with enthusiasm if not skill, while Rebecca attempted to sweep, but mostly succeeded in moving dust from one place to another. The twins alternated between helping and hindering, their boundless energy both a blessing and a challenge. By nightfall, they'd managed to establish some semblance of order in the kitchen and 2 bedrooms, though the rest of the house remained in chaos. Elijah prepared a simple meal of beans and salt pork, which the children ate without complaint, too tired from the day's work to fuss. As he tucked them into beds, the boys sharing one large bed, Rebecca in a smaller one nearby, Elijah felt the weight of all he didn't know pressing down on him. How had Margaret managed all this and still greeted him with a smile at day's end? The following afternoon brought the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Elijah, who had been mending the corral fence, looked up to see Dr. Adler arriving on a spirited chestnut mare. She wore a practical riding skirt and jacket, her medical bag secured behind her saddle. "Good afternoon, Mr. Nolan," she called, dismounting with practiced ease. "I trust the journey wasn't too taxing for Joseph." "He's resting inside," Elijah replied, setting down his tools. "The others are attempting to sort out the pantry, though I suspect they're making more mess than order." A smile touched her lips. "Then it seems I've arrived just in time." Inside, the chaos was evident. Flour dusted the floor, tin cans were arranged in precarious towers, and the twins had somehow managed to tangle themselves in a length of butcher's string. Rebecca was on the verge of tears, and Thomas looked completely overwhelmed. Dr. Adler surveyed the scene with remarkable composure. "Well now," she said cheerfully, removing her riding jacket, "this looks like quite the adventure." The children froze, expressions ranging from guilt to relief at the sight of her. "Dr. Adler," Rebecca exclaimed, "we're trying to help Pa, but everything's wrong." "Nothing's wrong that can't be fixed," the doctor assured her, rolling up her sleeves. "And please, when I'm not being a doctor, you may call me Miss Sarah." Over the next 3 hours, Sarah transformed the chaos into order. She showed Thomas how to properly stack supplies, taught Rebecca the basics of sweeping, and kept the twins occupied with simple, helpful tasks. She examined Joseph, pronounced him much improved, and got him to eat a full bowl of broth she prepared from scratch. Most remarkably, she accomplished all this while making it seem like a grand adventure rather than chores. The children responded to her calm instructions and gentle humor, their spirits visibly lifting. Elijah observed from the doorway, alternating between working outside and checking on the activity within. He couldn't help but notice the difference in his children. They were smiling, even laughing occasionally at Sarah's clever ways of turning work into games. As the afternoon waned, Sarah prepared a simple but nourishing stew with the ingredients available, teaching Rebecca how to safely stir the pot and Thomas how to judge when the meat was properly cooked. "You've worked miracles," Elijah commented as she prepared to leave, the house now in reasonable order and a hot meal waiting on the stove. "Hardly miracles, Mr. Nolan, just experience and patience." She hesitated, then added, "I've written down some simple instructions for everyday tasks." Thomas is quite capable with proper guidance, and Rebecca has a natural touch in the kitchen. Elijah's throat tightened unexpectedly. "You've done more in an afternoon than I could have managed in a week." "That's because you're trying to do everything, Mr. Nolan, the ranch and the children. It's too much for any one person." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Will you allow me to continue helping, at least until you're more settled?" In that moment, looking at his children's hopeful faces, Elijah let go of his pride. "Yes, Miss Adler, we would be most grateful." The arrangement fell into a natural rhythm over the following weeks. Sarah would arrive in the early afternoon after completing her morning patience, spend several hours with the children, and depart before sundown. She taught them basic household skills: cooking, cleaning, mending, while also ensuring they had time for reading and play. For Joseph, still regaining his strength, she brought books and simple puzzles. For the energetic twins, she devised games that channeled their enthusiasm productively. Thomas, eager to be the man of the family, received lessons in responsibility tempered with reminders that he was still a boy. And Rebecca, who missed her mother most keenly, flourished under Sarah's gentle guidance, following her like a shadow and soaking up her knowledge of herbs and home remedies. Meanwhile, Elijah worked from dawn to dusk establishing the ranch. He repaired fences, tended the small herd of cattle he'd purchased, and prepared fields for planting. Occasionally, he would pause to watch Sarah with his children through a window or doorway, a strange feeling tugging at his heart that he refused to examine too closely. On Sarah's fourth visit, as she was preparing to leave, Elijah found himself asking, "Why did you become a doctor, Miss Adler? It's an unusual choice for a woman." She secured her medical bag to her saddle before answering, "My father was a physician. After my mother died, I spent my days in his office, finding comfort in the order and purpose there. He taught me what he could, and when I showed aptitude, he encouraged me to pursue formal training." Her expression turned wry. "Against considerable opposition, I might add." "It couldn't have been easy. Few worthwhile things are, Mr. Nolan." She mounted her mare with practiced grace. "Just as rebuilding a life after loss isn't easy, but it is possible." As she rode away, Elijah found himself watching until she disappeared from sight, wondering about the losses she had faced beyond her mother's death. There was something in her manner when she spoke of the past, a guarded quality that suggested stories untold. The children's bedtime conversation that night centered entirely around Miss Sarah. Her clever ways of removing stains, her funny story about a frog in a doctor's bag, her promise to teach them to make apple dumplings when the weather cooled. "She's not like Ma," Thomas said thoughtfully as Elijah tucked him in, "but she makes things better somehow." "She does," Elijah agreed, surprising himself with the admission. "Pa," Rebecca called from her bed across the room, "does Miss Sarah have any little girls of her own?" "No, she doesn't have children." "Why not? She's awful good with us." Elijah considered how to answer. "Not all women marry and have children, Rebecca. Miss Sarah chose to be a doctor instead." "Can't she be both?" Rebecca persisted. "That would be up to her and whoever she might marry someday," Elijah replied, feeling strangely uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I think she'd make a nice ma," Rebecca murmured sleepily. "Don't you think so, Pa?" Elijah made a noncommittal sound and quickly changed the subject, but the innocent question lingered in his mind long after the children were asleep. The following week brought unexpected challenges. A late spring storm rolled in, dropping temperatures and bringing driving rain that turned the ranch yard to mud. Elijah worked frantically to secure young calves and repair a leak in the barn roof, returning to the house drenched and chilled to the bone. To his surprise, Sarah was still there, despite the late hour and worsening weather. "You shouldn't have waited," he said, dripping on the entryway floor. "The roads will be treacherous." "I'm well aware," she replied calmly, handing him a towel. "Which is why I've decided to stay until morning if you've no objection. I've prepared the small bedroom off the kitchen." Elijah stared at her, suddenly conscious of his muddy clothes and unshaven face. "People will talk." A hint of amusement touched her eyes. "People always do, Mr. Nolan. But I'm a physician, and my reputation can withstand practicality in the face of dangerous conditions. Besides, Rebecca has developed a slight cough that I'd like to monitor." Her practicality disarmed him. "Then we're grateful for your concern." The evening passed with unexpected warmth despite the howling wind outside. Sarah had prepared a hearty stew and fresh bread, and the children were clean and content. After dinner, she produced a book of folk tales and read to them by lamplight, her voice bringing the stories to life in a way that had even Thomas captivated. Elijah found himself watching her animated expressions, the way her hands moved as she described giants and fairy queens, the gentle patience with which she answered the twins' endless questions. Something inside him was shifting, walls carefully constructed after Margaret's death beginning to crack. Later, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet save for the patter of rain on the roof, Elijah found Sarah in the kitchen, writing in a small notebook by lamplight. "Patient notes?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. She looked up, a strand of hair falling loose from her usually neat arrangement. "Actually, recipes. Rebecca mentioned missing her mother's special biscuits. I thought I might try to recreate something similar." The simple kindness of the gesture caught him off guard. "You go to considerable trouble for children not your own, Miss Adler." She closed the notebook, her expression thoughtful. "Children deserve kindness, Mr. Nolan, especially those who have suffered loss." She hesitated, then added, "And I find myself quite fond of yours. They're equally fond of you." Elijah took a seat across from her, cradling his coffee cup. "I haven't properly thanked you for all you've done these past weeks." "No thanks necessary. I've enjoyed my time here." Even with the chaos and the never-ending work, a genuine smile brightened her face. "Perhaps especially because of that. My days are typically ordered and predictable. Your children bring life." Something in her tone prompted him to ask, "Were you ever married, Miss Adler?" The question seemed to surprise her. "No, there was someone once, another medical student. We had plans." Her expression clouded briefly. "But he couldn't reconcile himself to a wife who would be a doctor first. He wanted me to give up my practice after marriage." "And you couldn't?" "Would you give up ranching if someone demanded it?" she countered. "Fair point." Elijah studied her across the table, seeing her perhaps clearly for the first time not just as the competent doctor or the kind helper, but as a woman with her own story, her own disappointments and dreams. "His loss, I'd say." A flush colored her cheeks at the unexpected compliment. "What about you, Mr. Nolan? Will you tell me about your wife?" The question would have angered him weeks earlier, but now he found himself wanting to speak of Margaret. She was sunshine. Always laughing, always seeing the bright side of things. His voice softened with memory. "We met at a county fair back in Kansas. She was 16, I was 20. Married a year later and headed west. She must have been remarkably brave." She was, faced every hardship with a smile. even at the end. His voice caught. Even when she knew she was dying, she worried more about me and the children than herself. Sarah's eyes held compassion without pity. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Elijah took a deep breath. The children miss her terribly. I do too. Of course you do. Love doesn't end with death. She reached across the table, briefly touching his hand before withdrawing. But neither does life, Mr. Nolan. The simple truth of her words hung in the air between them, profound in their straightforward wisdom. For the first time since Margaret's death, Elijah felt something shift inside him, not a lessening of his love for his wife, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance that life indeed continued. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind washed clean skies and muddy roads. Sarah departed after breakfast, promising to return in 2 days if the roads improved. As Elijah watched her ride away, Thomas came to stand beside him. "Pa," the boy said hesitantly, "do you like Miss Sarah?" Elijah glanced down at his son's earnest face. "She's been a great help to us all." "That's not what I mean." Thomas kicked at a stone. "Jimmy Wilkins at school says his pa got sweet on the schoolteacher after his ma died, said it happens sometimes." Heat crept up Elijah's neck. "Miss Sarah is our friend and doctor, nothing more." Thomas looked unconvinced. "Rebecca says Miss Sarah looks at you special when you're not watching, and you look at her too." "That's enough, Thomas," Elijah said firmly. "There are chores waiting." But as he returned to his work, he couldn't dismiss his son's observations as easily as he'd hoped. Did he watch Sarah when she wasn't looking? Did she watch him? The thought was both unsettling and strangely exhilarating. 2 days stretched to 4 before the roads were passable again. When Sarah finally returned, the children greeted her with such enthusiasm that she was nearly knocked over by their combined embraces. "We thought maybe you weren't coming back," James exclaimed. "The creek flooded and Pa said no one could cross," Joseph added. Sarah smiled, kneeling to their level. "Well, the waters receded enough for my horse to manage, and I couldn't stay away another day. I missed my favorite helpers too much." Her gaze lifted to meet Elijah's, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, that the children weren't the only ones who had missed her presence. Life settled into a new pattern, as spring gave way to early summer. Sarah continued her afternoon visits, now expanded to include outdoor activities as the weather improved. She taught the children about medicinal plants growing wild on the ranch, helped them establish a small vegetable garden, and even instructed Thomas in basic first aid. For his part, Elijah found his harsh exterior softening. The ranch was coming along well, cattle fattening on the rich grass, fields planted with corn and wheat, the house gradually becoming a home again. He discovered himself looking forward to Sarah's visits, timing his work to bring him near the house in the afternoons, finding excuses to join them for the simple meals she prepared. One warm June afternoon, Sarah arrived to find Rebecca sobbing inconsolably on the porch steps. "Why, Rebecca?" "Whatever is the matter?" She quickly dismounted, rushing to the child's side. "Ma's quilt," Rebecca hiccuped between sobs. "I was airing it like you showed me, and the wind took it. It's caught in the big oak by the creek, and Pa's not here and Thomas can't reach it." Sarah glanced toward the creek, where a colorful patchwork quilt was indeed tangled in the branches of a massive oak tree. Thomas stood below, looking helplessly upward. "Well now, that is a predicament," Sarah said calmly, "but not an impossible one. Come, show me exactly where it is." To the children's amazement, Sarah assessed the tree with a critical eye, then began to remove her riding boots. "Miss Sarah, you can't climb a tree," Rebecca gasped. "Can't I?" Sarah's eyes twinkled with mischief. "My father's house had the most magnificent elm in the yard, and I spent half my childhood among its branches." Now, Thomas, I'll need your help to reach that first limb. With Thomas providing a boost, Sarah ascended into the tree with surprising agility, her split riding skirt allowing freedom of movement. She climbed carefully but confidently, making her way toward the trapped quilt while the children watched in awe from below. "Almost there," she called down, reaching for the colorful fabric. "Just a bit more." "What in heaven's name are you doing?" Elijah's voice startled her so badly she nearly lost her grip. He stood at the base of the tree, having returned from checking fence lines to find the town's lady doctor halfway up an oak tree on his property. "Rescuing a family heirloom," Sarah replied with as much dignity as her position allowed. "Though I admit it's not my usual medical procedure." She tugged the quilt free at last, carefully folding it over her arm before beginning her descent. When she reached the lowest branch, she hesitated, suddenly aware of the impropriety of her situation. Without a word, Elijah moved beneath her, reaching up to grasp her waist and help her down the final distance. For a brief moment, as her feet touched ground, his hands remained at her waist, their faces unexpectedly close. "Thank you," she murmured, suddenly breathless in a way that had nothing to do with climbing. He released her quickly, clearing his throat. "That was unorthodox, Miss Adler, but successful," she countered, presenting the rescued quilt to a beaming Rebecca, "and worth every improper moment." Later that evening, after Sarah had departed and the children were in bed, Elijah found himself on the porch, staring at the oak tree in the distance. The image of Sarah among its branches, determined and fearless, brought an unexpected smile to his lips. "Pa." Thomas's voice broke into his thoughts. The boy stood in the doorway, clearly hesitant to interrupt his father's solitude. "Shouldn't you be asleep?" Elijah asked, though without sternness. "I was thinking about Miss Sarah in that tree." Thomas came to stand beside him. "Ma would have liked her, don't you think?" The question caught Elijah by surprise. "Why do you say that?" Thomas shrugged. "Ma always said to judge people by what they do, not what they say. Miss Sarah says she cares about us, but she also shows it, like today with the quilt. She knew how important it was to Rebecca because it was Ma's." "Your mother was an excellent judge of character," Elijah said softly. "I think she would have approved of Miss Sarah, yes." Thomas seemed satisfied with this answer. After a moment, he added, "I don't remember Ma's voice so good anymore. Sometimes that makes me feel bad, like I'm forgetting her." Elijah put an arm around his son's shoulders. "You're not forgetting her, Thomas. She's part of you in ways that go deeper than memories. Miss Sarah says that too." Thomas leaned against his father. "She says Ma is in the way Rebecca smiles and how the twins always want one more story, just like she did." Elijah's throat tightened with emotion. "She's right about that." "Pa." Thomas looked up at him, his young face serious in the fading light. "It's okay if you like Miss Sarah. I think Ma would understand." Before Elijah could formulate a response to this astonishing statement, Thomas slipped back inside, leaving his father to contemplate the wisdom that sometimes came from the most unexpected sources. The 4th of July brought Redemption Creek's annual celebration, a community affair with food, games, music, and fireworks ordered specially from back east. Elijah had initially planned to skip the festivities, but his children's pleading and Sarah's gentle encouragement eventually persuaded him. "The children need to be part of the community," she'd pointed out. "And so do you, Mr. Nolan." The celebration was held in the town square, which had been transformed with bunting and lanterns. Tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes, and a small band played patriotic tunes on a makeshift stage. The Nolan family arrived mid-afternoon, the children scrubbed clean and wearing their best clothes. Elijah felt awkward at first, nodding stiffly to neighbors and acquaintances, but the children quickly dispersed to join games and activities organized for the young ones. "Mr. Nolan," Edwin Barnes approached, pumping his hand enthusiastically. "Good to see you joining in. How's that ranch coming along?" As Elijah fell into conversation about cattle prices and water rights, he gradually relaxed. Perhaps this hadn't been such a bad idea after all. Later, as twilight approached, he found himself searching the crowd for Sarah. They'd agreed to meet at the celebration rather than have her come to the ranch first, but he hadn't spotted her yet, looking for someone. The familiar voice came from behind him. Elijah turned to find Sarah standing there, and for a moment he couldn't find his voice. She wore a dress of deep blue that complemented her eyes, her hair arranged more elaborately than her usual practical style, with small white flowers woven through the chestnut strands. "Miss Adler," he finally managed. "You look different." A smile curved her lips. "Different good or different concerning?" "Good," he said quickly. "Definitely good." Her cheeks colored slightly at the compliment. "Thank you. I thought it appropriate to leave the practical doctor behind for one evening. The children will be sorry they missed seeing you like this." "They're off with their friends, but actually," she interrupted gently, "I was hoping to spend some time with just you this evening, Mr. Nolan, if that wouldn't be unwelcome." Something shifted in Elijah's chest. Hope, perhaps, or possibility. "That would be most welcome, Miss Adler." "Sarah," she said quietly, "when we're not discussing medical matters or children, I'd like it if you called me Sarah." "Elijah," he offered in return, holding out his arm. "Shall we find something to eat, Sarah?" The evening unfolded with unexpected magic. They shared a meal at one of the long tables, talking easily about everything except their usual topics of children and ranch matters. He learned about her childhood in Boston, her struggles in medical school, her dreams of someday opening a proper women's and children's hospital in the West. She listened as he told stories of his early days as a rancher, his travels before settling down, the books he loved but rarely found time to read anymore. As darkness fell and the fireworks display began, they found themselves standing slightly apart from the crowd, shoulders nearly touching as they gazed upward at the brilliant explosions of color. "Beautiful," Sarah murmured as a cascade of silver sparks illuminated the night sky. Elijah found himself watching her profile instead of the display. "Yes," he agreed, though he wasn't referring to the fireworks. She turned, catching his gaze, and the air between them seemed to still. For a heartbeat, Elijah thought he might kiss her, right there under the celebrating sky. The moment was broken by Rebecca's voice calling excitedly, "Pa, Miss Sarah, did you see that big red one?" The child appeared between them, followed closely by the rest of the Nolan brood, all talking at once about the fireworks and the games they'd played. Sarah smiled at Elijah over their heads, a smile that held promise and understanding both. The moment had passed, but something had changed between them. A door opened that neither seemed inclined to close. The journey home that night was filled with children's chatter, but Elijah's thoughts remained with Sarah and the almost kiss beneath the fireworks. For the first time since Margaret's death, he allowed himself to contemplate a future that held more than just survival and obligation. As July stretched into August, bringing scorching heat to the Arizona territory, the relationship between Elijah and Sarah continued to evolve. Her visits remained ostensibly for the children, but she began arriving earlier and staying later, sharing evening meals and sometimes lingering after the children were in bed for conversations on the porch. They were careful to maintain propriety always in view of the house, never alone behind closed doors, but the townsfolk noticed the changes. Gossip began to circulate about the widow Nolan and the lady doctor, though most of it was good-natured. After all, The transformation in both Elijah and his children was plain for all to see, and few could find fault with a match that seemed so beneficial to all concerned. One blistering afternoon, Sarah arrived to find the house unusually quiet. Inside, she discovered Rebecca looking after the younger boys, all of them subdued. "Where's Thomas?" she asked, laying a hand on Joseph's forehead to check for fever out of habit. "With Pa," Rebecca replied. "The big red bull got out and went after one of the calves. They've been gone since morning." Sarah frowned, glancing out the window at the sun-scorched landscape. "In this heat, they should have taken more water." "Pa took the canteen," Rebecca said, "but Thomas forgot his." The concern in the child's voice prompted Sarah to action. "Rebecca, stay with your brothers. I'm going to find them." She quickly filled 2 canteens with fresh water and headed out on her mare, following the most likely path toward the south pasture where the cattle usually grazed. The August heat was oppressive, the sun beating down mercilessly from a cloudless sky. After nearly an hour of searching, she spotted them in the distance, Elijah on horseback, Thomas on foot, both driving the massive red bull toward a makeshift pen constructed of rope and branches. Even from a distance, she could see the flush on Thomas's face, the way he staggered slightly as he moved, heat exhaustion. Her medical mind diagnosed immediately. She urged her horse forward, arriving just as Elijah secured the makeshift gate, trapping the bull inside. "Miss Sarah." Thomas looked confused at her appearance, swaying slightly where he stood. Elijah turned sharply at his son's words. "Sarah, what are you doing out here, bringing water and none too soon?" She dismounted quickly, going straight to Thomas and pressing a canteen into his hands. "Small sips, Thomas, not too fast." The boy drank obediently, his hands trembling slightly. "He forgot his water," Elijah explained, his expression tight with worry as he accepted the second canteen from Sarah. "I gave him most of mine, but you're both suffering from the heat," Sarah interrupted, examining Thomas with clinical efficiency. "His pulse is rapid, skin hot and dry, classic heat exhaustion. We need to get him into shade immediately." Together, they helped Thomas onto Elijah's horse, then led both animals toward a stand of cottonwood trees near a dry creek bed. In the meager shade, Sarah continued her treatment, removing Thomas's shirt and using it, dampened with precious water, to cool his overheated body. "Will he be all right?" Elijah asked, his usual composure cracking with concern for his son. "Yes, if we can cool him gradually and get more fluids into him." Sarah's voice was calm and professional, though her hands moved with urgent care. "The human body is remarkably resilient, especially at his age." As she worked, Elijah watched the sure movements of her hands, the gentle way she spoke to Thomas, the complete focus she brought to the task of healing his son. In that moment, something crystallized within him, a certainty that had been building for weeks. When Thomas had stabilized enough to be moved, they carefully situated him on Elijah's horse, with Elijah walking alongside to keep him steady. Sarah led her mare, maintaining a slow, careful pace back to the ranch house. By the time they arrived, Thomas was alert enough to protest being carried inside, though he allowed his father to help him to his bed. Sarah prepared a solution of salt and sugar in water to replace what his body lost. She explained and supervised as he drank it slowly. The younger children hovered anxiously until Sarah assured them their brother would be fine after rest and plenty of fluids. She organized them into a rotation to sit with Thomas, giving each a specific responsibility that made them feel important while ensuring their brother wasn't left alone. Later, as evening cooled the air and Thomas slept peacefully, Sarah joined Elijah on the porch. "Thank you," he said simply. "If you hadn't come when you did." "But I did," she replied, "and he'll be fine. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the chirping of crickets beginning their nightly chorus. "I've been thinking," Elijah finally said, his voice careful but determined, "about what happens when summer ends." Sarah's hand stilled in her lap. "Oh, the children start school soon. The ranch will demand less of my time as winter approaches." He turned to face her directly. "You've been generous with your time, Sarah, but I can't expect you to continue indefinitely. You have your practice, your own life." "I've never considered my time here an obligation, Elijah." Her voice was soft in the gathering dusk. "Quite the opposite, in fact. Even so, we need a more permanent arrangement." Sarah's breath caught. "What exactly are you proposing?" Elijah took a deep breath. "I'm not good with words, never have been. Margaret used to tease me about it." He paused, surprised to find that mentioning his late wife no longer brought sharp pain, only a gentle nostalgia. "But I want to be clear. These past months watching you with my children, getting to know you, I've come to care for you, Sarah, deeply." In the fading light, he could see her eyes widen, though she remained silent. "I know it's soon," he continued. "Some might say too soon after Margaret, but life is unpredictable and often shorter than we expect. Today proved that." He reached for her hand, holding it gently between his own. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer, but I want you to consider becoming my wife, the children's mother, a permanent part of our family." Sarah's free hand moved to cover her mouth, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Elijah," the screen door creaked, interrupting her response. Rebecca stood there in her nightgown, looking uncertainly between them. "Thomas is asking for you, Miss Sarah," she said. "He says his head hurts." Sarah composed herself quickly, squeezing Elijah's hand before releasing it. "I'll come right away." As she followed Rebecca inside, she glanced back at Elijah, her expression a complex mixture of emotion. "We'll continue this conversation," she promised softly. The next morning, Elijah woke to find Thomas much improved, though still confined to bed on Sarah's orders. She had stayed the night, sleeping in Rebecca's room while the little girl bunked with her brothers, insisting on monitoring Thomas until she was certain the heat exhaustion wouldn't develop into something more serious. When Elijah entered the kitchen, he found Sarah already there, preparing breakfast as if she belonged. The domestic scene stirred something profound within him, a vision of mornings like this stretching into years. Sarah at the heart of his home, his family complete once more. "Morning," he said, suddenly shy after his declaration the previous evening. She turned, a flush coloring her cheeks. "Good morning. I hope you don't mind that I started breakfast. The children will be hungry when they wake." "I don't mind at all." He moved to stand beside her at the stove, close enough that their arms nearly touched. "Sarah, about last night, I need to return to town this morning," she interrupted gently. "I have patients who have been waiting and I should change my clothes." Disappointment coursed through him. "Of course." She placed a hand on his arm. "But I'll return this evening if I may. I think we have much to discuss." The promise in her eyes rekindled his hope. "I'll be waiting." The day passed with excruciating slowness for Elijah. He checked on Thomas frequently, handled essential chores around the ranch, and tried not to watch the road for Sarah's return. The children, sensing his distraction, were unusually well behaved, even the twins managing to stay out of mischief. As the sun began its descent, Thomas called Elijah to his bedside. "Pa," he said with the seriousness of a boy trying to be a man, "are you going to ask Miss Sarah to marry you?" Elijah blinked in surprise. "What makes you ask that?" "I wasn't really asleep last night when you were talking on the porch," Thomas admitted. "I heard some of it." Elijah sighed, taking a seat on the edge of his son's bed. Yes, I am, or rather I did, last night. What did she say? We were interrupted before she could answer. Thomas nodded sagely. By Rebecca, sorry about that. No need to apologize, your health was more important. Elijah hesitated, then asked, would it bother you if Miss Sarah became part of our family, permanently? Thomas considered the question with genuine thought. I used to worry that if you found someone new, it would mean forgetting Ma. But Miss Sarah talks about Ma sometimes, asks us what she was like, makes sure we remember. He looked up at his father. I think she'd be a good Ma for us now, even though she's different from our first Ma. The simple wisdom in his son's words brought a lump to Elijah's throat. When did you get so smart, Thomas Nolan? A grin broke across the boy's face. Miss Sarah says I take after you. By early evening, Sarah had not yet arrived. Elijah fed the children dinner, supervised their bedtime routines, and tried not to worry about her absence. Perhaps she had been delayed by a patient, or perhaps the thought he tried hardest to suppress, she had reconsidered his proposal and found it wanting. The children were asleep and Elijah was sitting alone on the porch, watching the moon rise over the distant mountains, when he finally heard the approach of a horse. Sarah appeared out of the darkness, her expression unreadable as she dismounted. I apologize for the lateness of the hour, she said, securing her mare to the hitching post. There was an emergency. Mrs. Peterson's baby decided to arrive a month early. Are they well? Elijah asked, rising to meet her. Both mother and daughter are thriving. A smile touched her lips. A perfect little girl with a surprisingly strong set of lungs. You must be exhausted. I am, she admitted, but there are more important matters than my fatigue. She took a deep breath. May we sit? They settled side by side on the porch steps, close enough to speak quietly but not touching. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. I've thought of little else since your words last night, Sarah began. I've questioned my feelings, my motivations, whether this is wise for any of us. Elijah's heart sank at her serious tone. And your conclusion? She turned to face him fully, her expression earnest in the moonlight. My conclusion is that wisdom has very little to do with matters of the heart. When I came to Redemption Creek, I had resigned myself to a life of service through my profession. I never expected to find a family who would come to mean so much to me. Hope flickered within him. And now I find myself unable to imagine a life that doesn't include you, all of you. Her voice softened. I love your children, Elijah, and I love you. Not in spite of your gruff exterior, or your stubborn pride, or your occasional harshness, but because of the man beneath all that, the man who would give his last drop of water to his son, who reads Rebecca the same story 3 times because she asks, who notices when the twins are trying to be good even when they fail. Elijah reached for her hands, his throat tight with emotion. Is that a yes, Sarah Adler? It's a yes with conditions, she replied, her practical nature asserting itself even in this moment. I won't give up my practice. The town needs a doctor and it's part of who I am. I would never ask you to. And I'll need help, a housekeeper or someone to assist when I'm called away for medical emergencies. I won't be the perfect frontier wife who manages everything alone. We'll find someone, he promised. Together, her eyes searched his face. And Margaret. You must know I'll never try to replace her. I'll honor her memory, especially for the children. Margaret would have liked you, Elijah said softly, echoing Thomas's words from weeks before. She always said that if anything happened to her, she wanted the children and me to be happy. She made me promise. Tears glimmered in Sarah's eyes. Then I accept your proposal, Elijah Nolan. I would be honored to become your wife and a mother to your children. Elijah drew her into his arms, his kiss tender at first, then deepening with the emotions that had been building between them for months. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I should go," Sarah whispered, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "Stay," Elijah countered. Not like that, but in the guest room. It's too late for you to ride back to town alone." She nodded, understanding the propriety he was trying to maintain. "When shall we tell the children?" "At breakfast," he suggested, "though I suspect Thomas already knows." Sarah laughed softly. "That boy misses very little." "Like his father," Elijah agreed, pressing one more kiss to her lips before leading her inside. The morning brought chaos as the children reacted to the news of the upcoming marriage. Rebecca and the twins were immediately enthusiastic, peppering Sarah with questions about whether she would live with them forever and if they could call her Ma. Thomas maintained a dignified satisfaction, as though he'd orchestrated the whole affair himself. "When will the wedding be?" Rebecca wanted to know, bouncing in her seat at the breakfast table. Elijah glanced at Sarah, realizing they hadn't discussed the timing. "That depends on Miss Sarah's schedule, I suppose. And how long it takes to arrange things properly," Sarah added, "though I don't want an elaborate affair." "Before school starts?" Joseph asked hopefully. Sarah smiled at the eager faces around her. "I think that could be arranged, perhaps in 3 weeks. That would give us time to prepare without unnecessary delay." 3 weeks, Elijah repeated, finding he didn't want to wait any longer than necessary himself. "Reverend Hopkins will be pleased. He's been hinting that I should find the children a mother since we arrived in town." "Has he now?" Sarah's eyebrows rose in amusement. "Well, I'm glad to help you satisfy the good Reverend's expectations." The news of their engagement spread through Redemption Creek with remarkable speed. By noon, Sarah had received congratulations from 3 patients, and Elijah encountered knowing smiles when he visited the general store for supplies. "About time," Edwin Barnes commented when Elijah mentioned needing extra flour for the wedding cake Mrs. Barnes had offered to bake. "Whole town's been watching you two dance around each other all summer. Got a betting pool going on when you'd finally ask her." Elijah shook his head, though without real irritation. "Glad to provide entertainment for Redemption Creek's finest citizens." The 3 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparations. Sarah continued her medical practice while helping the children prepare for the changes ahead. A room in the ranch house was converted into a small office where she could see patients in emergencies, and Elijah hired Mrs. Rodriguez, a widow from town, to help with household duties when Sarah was called away on medical matters. Together, they purchased a larger bed for the master bedroom and rearranged furniture to accommodate Sarah's books and medical equipment. Rebecca insisted on helping Sarah sew new curtains, learning stitches with determined concentration, while Thomas and Elijah built additional shelves for her medical texts. 2 days before the wedding, a letter arrived from Sarah's father in Boston, giving his blessing and expressing regret that he couldn't attend due to his health. Sarah read it aloud to the family at dinner, her voice catching only slightly on the closing lines. "I have no doubt that you have found where you belong, my dear daughter. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become." "Will he ever visit us?" Rebecca asked. "Perhaps next spring," Sarah replied, folding the letter carefully. "He's not fond of winter travel." "Then he'll get to meet the new baby," James said matter-of-factly, continuing to eat his potatoes. Elijah choked on his coffee. "What new baby?" James looked confused by the adult's reaction. "When you get married, you have babies. That's what Tommy Peterson said at school." Sarah's cheeks flushed pink while Elijah struggled to maintain his composure. "That's not always immediate, son." "But someday?" Rebecca asked, looking between them with hopeful eyes. Sarah exchanged a glance with Elijah, a silent communication passing between them. "Someday," she agreed softly, "if we're blessed." The wedding day dawned clear and mild, the oppressive heat of August finally giving way to the gentler warmth of early September. The ceremony was held in Redemption Creek's small church, filled to capacity with townspeople who had come to respect both the harsh cowboy who'd slowly softened and the lady doctor who'd helped transform him. Sarah wore a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a formal veil. Rebecca served as her attendant, beaming with importance in her new blue dress as she carried a small bouquet matching Sarah's larger one. The twins, scrubbed clean and solemn with responsibility, walked ahead of the bride, scattering flower petals with more enthusiasm than precision. Thomas stood proudly beside his father at the altar, the wedding ring secure in his pocket until the moment they were needed. When Sarah appeared at the church doorway, Elijah felt his breath catch. The months of gradual change, of walls slowly dismantled and hearts carefully opened, culminated in this moment of certainty. As she walked toward him, their eyes locked in shared understanding. This was right. This was meant to be. This was the beginning of their shared future. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. When Reverend Hopkins invited them to speak their vows, Elijah surprised Sarah by setting aside the traditional words in favor of his own. "Sarah, when you first said, 'Let me help you with them,' I saw only a temporary solution to an impossible situation. I didn't know then that you were the answer to a prayer I hadn't even known how to pray." His voice deepened with emotion. "You brought healing not just to my son's fever but to our broken home. You taught me that harshness isn't strength, that accepting help isn't weakness, that love can be found even after great loss." Tears glistened in Sarah's eyes as she responded with her own vows. "Elijah, I came to Redemption Creek to practice medicine, but I found something I never expected: a family. You and these 4 remarkable children have shown me that there are many ways to heal, and that sometimes the doctor needs healing too. I promise to love you all the days of my life, to care for your children as my own, and to build our future together with the same courage and determination that brought us to this moment." When Reverend Hopkins pronounced them husband and wife, Elijah kissed his bride with a tenderness that belied his reputation as the harsh cowboy of Redemption Creek. The congregation erupted in cheers, led by the enthusiastic whoops of the twins, who had apparently forgotten the solemnity of the occasion. The celebration that followed at the town hall was joyous and informal, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed half the territory. Sarah danced not only with her new husband but with each of her new sons, showing remarkable patience as the twins stepped repeatedly on her toes. When it came time for Rebecca's dance, the little girl insisted on being taught the steps properly, like a real lady, prompting misty eyes from more than one observer. As the evening waned, Elijah found a moment alone with his bride near the punch bowl. "Happy Mrs. Nolan." The name brought a radiant smile to Sarah's face, happier than I ever imagined possible. She glanced across the room where the children were playing with their friends, though I admit to some nervousness about our first night as a family in our home. Elijah followed her gaze, understanding her concern. The children had never known their father to share a room with anyone but their mother. "They'll adjust. They love you already. And I love them." She squeezed his hand. "All of you." Later that night, after the children were tucked into their beds in the ranch house, with Rebecca extracting a promise that nothing would change except that Miss Sarah will be here every morning now, Elijah and Sarah stood alone in the master bedroom that was now theirs together. "Welcome home, Dr. Sarah Nolan," Elijah said softly. using the professional name she'd decided to maintain. "It's been home for longer than I realized," she admitted, moving into his arms. "These walls have held my heart since that first afternoon when Rebecca asked if I could fix Sad." "And can you?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Fix Sad, not fix," she corrected gently. "But heal, perhaps, in time, with love." She rose on tiptoe to kiss him, her arms encircling his neck. "And I intend to prescribe a great deal of love for this family, Dr. Nolan's orders." "I believe I'll follow the doctor's orders explicitly," Elijah murmured against her lips, pulling her closer as the moonlight spilled through the window of the home they would now share. In the year that followed, the Nolan family thrived. The ranch prospered under Elijah's careful management, allowing them to hire additional help that freed him to spend more time with his growing family. Sarah established regular office hours in town 3 days a week, with emergency calls taken as needed, finding a balance between her medical practice and her role as wife and mother. The children blossomed under the combined influence of their father's steady strength and Sarah's gentle guidance. Thomas entered adolescence with surprising grace, taking on more responsibility around the ranch while maintaining his studies with determination. Rebecca discovered a talent for storytelling, often entertaining her younger brothers with tales of princesses who saved themselves and cowboys who cried when appropriate. The twins gradually became more distinguishable in personality, as James revealed an aptitude for numbers, and Joseph showed artistic talent that Sarah encouraged with proper supplies and instruction. Christmas brought Sarah's father for an extended visit, his initial reservation about his daughter's frontier marriage dissolving at the sight of her obvious happiness. He delighted the children with stories of Sarah's childhood mischief, and impressed Elijah with his medical knowledge and evident pride in his daughter's accomplishments. By spring, the news Sarah and Elijah had privately hoped for was confirmed. A new Nolan would join their family by late summer. They shared the news with the children one Sunday after church, uncertain how they might react to a baby sibling. "I told you so," was James's immediate response, causing the adults to laugh. "Will it be a sister?" Rebecca asked hopefully. "I'm tired of brothers." "We won't know until the baby arrives," Sarah explained, placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "But whether brother or sister, this baby will need all of you to help." "I'm good at helping," Joseph declared proudly. "You all are," Elijah agreed, gathering his family close. "It's what Nolans do best." The baby, a boy they named William after Sarah's father, arrived in August during a spectacular thunderstorm that had Elijah pacing the porch while Mrs. Rodriguez assisted the town's other doctor with the delivery. The children, banished to the kitchen but refusing to sleep, played endless rounds of checkers until their father finally appeared with the news, his face wet with what might have been rain or tears or both. "You have a brother," he announced, his voice rough with emotion. "And your mother is fine." "Tired but fine." "Can we see them?" Thomas asked, already on his feet. Elijah nodded, leading his children to the bedroom where Sarah lay propped against pillows, a small bundle in her arms. Her face was drawn with exhaustion but radiant with joy as she looked up at her family. "Come meet William," she invited, carefully adjusting the blanket to reveal the baby's face. The children gathered around, their expressions a mixture of awe and curiosity. Rebecca reached out a tentative finger to touch the baby's cheek. "He's so small." "You were all this small once," Sarah told them. "Even you, Thomas." "Not possible," the 12-year-old declared, though he leaned in for a closer look. "He has Pa's nose," James observed. "And Sarah's mouth," Thomas added, using Sarah as the children had decided to call her, reserving Ma for the mother they'd lost but still honored in their hearts. Joseph, quietest of the twins, asked the question that surprised them all. "Does this mean you're our real mother now?" "Because you made a baby with Pa." Sarah exchanged a glance with Elijah before answering carefully. "I've been your real mother since the day I promised to love and care for you, Joseph. This baby doesn't change that. He just gives you one more person to love and be loved by." Joseph seemed to consider this before nodding. "That's good. I didn't want things to change." "Some things will change," Elijah said honestly, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Babies need a lot of attention. But the important things, how much we love each of you, how much you matter to this family, those will never change." Later, when the children had been shooed to bed, and the baby slept peacefully in the cradle Elijah had crafted, husband and wife had a moment alone. "You did wonderfully," Elijah murmured, pressing a kiss to Sarah's forehead. "He's perfect." "They're all perfect," she replied, her eyes already growing heavy with well-earned sleep. "All 5 of them." Elijah watched as his wife drifted into slumber, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, he had been a harsh, grieving man struggling to raise 4 motherless children on his own. Now, he was the patriarch of a thriving family, married to a woman whose strength and compassion continued to amaze him daily. As if sensing his thoughts, baby William stirred in his cradle, making the small mewling sounds that preceded either contentment or complaint. Elijah gently lifted his newest son, cradling him close as he moved to the window. "Your mother is remarkable," he whispered to the infant. "She came into our lives and saw not broken things to be fixed, but people worth loving. Remember that lesson, little one. It's the most valuable one I can teach you." Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the desert air washed clean. Stars emerged from behind retreating clouds, their eternal light a reminder that even the darkest nights eventually yield to brightness. On the horizon, the faintest hint of dawn appeared, not yet day, but the promise of it. Elijah Nolan, no longer the harsh cowboy but a man tempered by love and loss and love again, held his son to the window to witness his first sunrise, symbolic of the new day that had dawned for their family when Sarah had uttered those simple words that changed everything. "Let me help you with them."